we can go on without break up to 7 sharp, but let's see how powers and voices are playing around. Just to improvise on what I just said on the powers of my voice. When Homer, before starting these wonderful, about 500 hexameters, telling all the ships going to Troja, he addresses the muses, saying that the muses are and are present and are in the way of knowing all. And immortals are bound to listen rumors and fames and the New York Times. And that's why, before starting this long catalogue, he asked the muses to give him 10 mouths, stronger than usual in mortals, and a lung which stays more phrases and hours than usual in order to finish this wonderful song. And this is at the limits of what can be done, I'd say. And if you compare this Homeric modesty with the immodesty of St. Paul in the first letter to the Corinthians, asking for love and faith and hope and angels' voices in order to overwhelm everybody in this Greek-speaking world with the Russian message. There is a difference between Greek modesty and feasibility and the radical idealist transformation in the later Christian reception. So we have to come to the issue why the pre-Socratic Greece turned into the so-called classical Greece, how it became possible that Plato and Aristotle dominated our discourse on what is good, and what is sign, what is letter, what is word, what is sentence, what is syllable. To make a long story short, I probably should say in starting that the difference between pre-Socratic and Socratic Greece is the invention of the coin. Now we know electronic money and all this criminal stuff, but at first the coin had to be invented as an exchange medium between different states, cities, and small kingdoms in the Near East. As far as I can tell, the coin started being not a coin, but something like a treasury, like Fort Knox, so to say. The king of Sardis, Lydia, had a big treasury where he piled up his gold, and he put his seal onto these gold barrels, and this was his This was his material power. But in the course of time, this kingdom of Lydia got into far commerce with the Greek polis, cities of Ephesus and Smyrna and others. And suddenly these fixed barrels of gold turned into coins and became and got different signifiers, which is the king of Sardis, but Ephesus coined its own coins, and Athens coined her own. There were no numerical values, as in later in Roman times, inscribed on these coins. It was just the name of the city, abbreviated mostly, alpha, theta, eta for Athens on the foreground face, and the owl, Athene's owl, on the background side. But it was a drachmae, and it was valuable throughout the whole of Greece and in the surrounding Near Eastern kingdoms.
This is why we still speak about carrying out to Athens.
Yeah. Johannes Lohmann, whom I'm so grateful, always stressed the fact that this coin, in its generality, its value throughout Greece, was a tangible material equivalent of the logos, of the concept of the concept. If you take logos as the concept of the concept, so the nomisma, the money, nomisma, standing for nomos, the law, is some kind of an economic, practical introduction of generality inside the field of economic and political relations. And it has to do, as Tanya made clear, with acts of writing and sealing and coining. And insofar says adieu, bye-bye, to the old pre-Socratic laws, nomoi, reigning over the Greek polis, cities, which all were unwritten. In Sparta, Lycurgus, the lawgiver, was very proud never to wrote down any law, because written laws you can change, being the subject of the Spartan lawgiver. Unwritten laws you are unable to change, you are bound to them just like charm and fascination and magic. And Lycurgus, before he parted from Sparta to the holy place of the oracle of Delphi, asked his Spartan patriots, compatriots, to swear to keep to these new unwritten laws for the meantime, before he, as long as he would not return from Delphi to Sparta. and this swore it, yeah? But he never came back. He stopped to eat, he stopped to drink, in doing so he put himself into death, and he ordered that his body should be burned to ashes, and the ashes be dissipated on the sea of the Corinthian Gulf. In this way, the Spartans could never physically manipulate the Korgos' dead body and change the value of the unwritten laws. I just told you this in remembrance to the tragedy and to Antigone and to her saying that the nomoi agraptoi, the unwritten laws, are much older and much more powerful than all the commands issued by the crazy tyrant named Creon. So to see the least, the Greeks' attitude to writing was ambiguous. Literacy probably was most developed at Athens, since Solon, the lawgiver of Athens, put on the marketplace turnable wooden tablets where his Solon's laws were inscribed, and everybody could read them. The reason for this readability was following Solon, a democracy. And as everybody of you knows, this Athenian democracy culminated in the practice of the ostrakismos. All the citizens of Athens, that is all the grown men minus the women, Antroi, Athenaioi, were called together and proposed the question whether one famous soldier or politician should be allowed to stay in the city or go away from 10 years without loss of property and so on. And everybody was allowed to write down his opinion on a little fragment of ceramic. And we have found many of them, these ostrakismoi, these Scherbengerichte, these and many of these, for instance, in the case of the famous strategist Themistocles, there has been found in the soil a whole nest of ostrakismic fragments, ceramic fragments, all written by the same hand. So it was prepared by some political party to throw him out. And the so-called degree of literacy in classical Greece was not so big as, let's say, George Bush would like to have it. It would take a much too long time to demonstrate you the long and systematical change from from a musical education of the young to an alphabetic and grammatical education of these young, especially boys. I've written my last book on issues like these, and unfortunately MIT Press has shown no interest in these old Greek questions, although in my eyes they are very technical, just also technical like any decision of software engineering these days. We learn from this alphabetic Paideia education system that the fully analytical power of the alphabet was not applied to the young girls and boys, and maybe probably girls. They didn't learn A, B, C, and so on, but rather Ba, Be, Bi, Bo, Bu, as in the case of the Minoan Jinyabi. This is much more easier for children than the final analysis into last for names and signifiers. And only philosophers, I should say, and try to say, any interesting parallel event?
We are doing another kind of lesson.
Oh?
No, it's in the next one.
Yeah.
We are doing another kind of course.
Yeah, another kind.
Yeah. It's another kind.
Yeah. Quite another kind.
I don't know how kind it is, but
maybe we should all learn to recite a Sappho poem in the end. So maybe we all should learn to recite a Sappho poem in the end. So
We could do it right now.
yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
It's stressful me, really. But if you try to, okay, before we start deconstructing Plato himself, in a way quite different from Derrida's way, okay, I give you my four-liner, Sappho's most famous four-liner. Maybe it's a fragment and was originally a part of a poem much longer than 4 lines. But my friend Jasper Sevendro has asked me, Friedrich, could you think of any continuation of these 4 lines? And I was compelled to answer, no, Jasper, I don't see no continuation at all. The poem is perfect. And now you may hear it. You should know that this very, before hearing the Ionic dialect of Sappho, it's probably nice to know that in her dialect there was no age. There was no spiritus aster, no Semitic or roughness in language. And so this poem goes, Deduken men aselanna, taple iades mesta de nuptai, para derke tora ego demona cathoito. And stop. Deduken men aselanna. It's not Selene, as it would in Attic or Ionian dialect. It's Aselana. The Yeah, sure, but now we have to compete with James Joyce and other, and T.S. Eliot, and make something beautiful out of Asalana. In Hollywood's Boys would write Die Mondin, at least in his German translation. In English? I shouldn't be too ritual about these 4 lines. The loon female has something, yeah, under the sea, probably, because it's a poem written on an island. And the Pleiades too, the famous 7 stars, whose disappearance announces winter time and suspect coldness and ice and so on. Para Dora, maybe the hour goes by. This may mean this is the last ontological property of human life, that it goes by. But it may also mean I had a date, Bora, and he or she didn't show up. Ego de mona catoido. But I sleep or have to sleep alone. Mona is a feminine form. Sappho speaks about herself, about her body, about her sleeping alone. Which is the trait which I feel most touching is the absence of any metaphor or allegory. It's just everyday or every night experience, and so simple and so rhythmical, and so let's do it again. Pero que men aselana, Pleiades mesa de nuptai, para dergedora ego de mona cateoro. Unfortunately, the glory and the power and the magic of European poetry was at the beginning with Homer and Sappho and Sophocles, and has left us more and more. If you compare James Joyce's Ulysses with Homer, the Odyssey, you won't hesitate which to prefer.
Maybe we should point out that Sappho is also important to this lecture because she herself was writing about the difference between vowels and consonants. So
I said it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think you include.
I suggested that, to my best knowledge, she was the first to distinguish between phoneenta and aphona, between sounding speech elements, vocals, vowels, phoneenta, and aphona, soundless, consonantic. You should, as my time and your time is limited, thanks to the gods, I can't do everything I'd like to do. So if you come back to Italy or New York City, or you have to have a look at St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 14, and then you will find these fundamental two concepts, phoneenta, ta phoneenta, the vowels, and ta aphona, the consonants, as generalized concepts for the Christian faith and practice. Nothing on earth is aphonon, St. Paul writes. Nothing on earth is just consonantic. I should criticize this famous phrase by saying, okay, one thing is certainly a consonantic, and this thing is called Yahweh. But we have to work. Before Tanya spelled me to come back to Sappho and the silence, I said that usually the Athenian young boys, before they were introduced into pederastic relations with elder men, were introduced to reading and writing and singing by sequences such as ba baby wo boo, ga baby wo boo, and so on until infinity. And this is the real stuff from which Plato organizes his etymological treatise called Rhetilus. And Derrida is so mistaken in his famous long interpretation, the pharmacy of Plato, that I should simply make the most simple argument. General idea of Plato is every noun, especially, there are also verbs, but nouns are more important. Every noun has a natural meaning, significance. And some nouns, in some cases of nouns, you can really read it. If you have the noun beta, you know that the letters eta, theta, alpha don't tell us much, but the sound of beta, of be, is indispensable for beta, the name, the alphabetic name of the second letter in the Greek alphabet. And so to theta and to alpha, these are approximations of the idea, philosophical name, where the thing and the symbol coincide. But then, concludes Socrates, there are 4 nouns in the Greek language where this identity between sense and sound is perfect. And these are to o, to o, to I, to e, to e. I think I just improvised 5, and later it's only 4. That is to say, before the Greeks introduced letter names like iota or omega or omicron, they had just the name to o for the short o, and to o for the long o. And in these 4 cases, Platon's ideal of identity was really implemented, and that's why the language and script discussed in Platon's Rhetilus, in Platon's Philippus, in Platon's Phaedrus have nothing to do with Egypt and the god Thoth, but in all 3 cases with the vocalic richness of the Greek alphabet. And Derrida, being being a Jewish philosopher of French language in an Arab context, I just quoted him, won't or didn't accept this. His lifelong he fought for an alphabet without any pronunciation, without any sayability. He opted, without saying so, for the Hebrew alphabet against the Greek one. Everybody is free to do so, or not so, but you should put your cards on the table, and he didn't. Somebody will learn elementary German and read my second volume and discover my friendly fight with him. In passing, I just mention that this idea of identity created by Plato didn't simply transform the concept of letters, but even that of the gods. And this was, as you may imagine, worse. But in fact, the Platonic gods and goddesses, if there were goddesses anymore, acted and reacted just like Platonic letters. They stayed identical to themselves under every, let's say, geometric transformation. God, one God probably, only one God, is his idea. His idea is just one and can't be and can't change. So if the idea can't change in time, the God can't change. The God has no chance to transform himself into a swan, into an ox, into an eagle, or into pouring rain in order to love some Leda or Alcmene or all these beautiful young pre-Socratic princesses running over Greece. And the God is so to say arrested in his morphe, in his shape, in his visible shape as in his conceptual shape. And if he doesn't behave this way, he must be corrected. Given all these metamorphoses Homer and other poets have ascribed to the gods, all these becoming bears and boars and eagles and so on, these events have to be thrown out from experience and put into mythology or explained away by allegoric fidgeting around. The god is heaven, and the goddess beneath him is earth, and so they are in some Platonic right to see one or the other. This oblivion of the literal sense of the text, this transgression into metaphysical, idealistic readings didn't stop with the Greeks or the Romans or the Stoics. It went on more and more heavy with the early Christians, and so we are born from an allegoric culture inside which the idea that the gods did make law, I quote Jimmy Hendrix, is simply unacceptable. Because, nevertheless, it's the most elementary truth ever produced without the gods making love and our parents making love. Nobody of us would sit here on this table. So after all these Platonic Verirrungen,
Getting lost.
after all these Platonic aberrations, it's a pleasure to come back to his cool and prosaic student Aristotle from Stagaira. Who was the first one, so to say, to build up a theory of writing, which I may short up in difference to my notes. What troubles Aristotle most is this combinatorial status of syllables and words. You have AN or NA, you have BA or AB, and both syllables have different meanings, bar and up. And how this comes, this is his most, I think, terrifying and quite simple question, which has to do with his lifelong struggle from materiality to shape, to idols, from Byle, matter, to visible and recognizable form in this world. And so, for instance, in the chapter 20 of the Poetics, Aristotle makes a long course from the single letter of the Greek alphabet through the syllables to the nouns and verbs to the phrase, to the logos, up to the logos, where the sense is finally revealed. And letters are matter relating to syllables as form. That is, syllables are more formal, more eidetic, more intellectual or intelligible than sounds. And at the same time, syllables are less intelligent and less eidetic than words, so that letter to syllable equals syllable to word, and this is a very unkind mathematical relation into which Aristotle didn't enter what I did. The point about all this relation between matter and form, which are fundamental concepts dominating each of our everyday papers and writing and essays, and it's terrible how powerful Aristotle has influenced our terminology. And all this has to do with the impossible and searched for difference between singing, speaking, and writing. all know probably Aristotle's remark from the beginning of the Politics that mankind is the only zoon, logon, echon, the only animal which has the logos, the speech, the power to speak. Okay, he never revokes this sentence, but logos is not so far away from dialectos, which is dialect, verbatim, and which is a power of the mouth to articulate itself in meaningful, different syllables. This is not the job of cows and oxes when they moo and so on. But this is the case of nightingales. Nightingales, for Aristotle, can sing because their singing is not a natural gift, but has been learned from younger male nightingales by older ones, and some nightingales learn many songs, and others learn few. And the difference between human children and young nightingales tends to zero in my lecture. And if we ask which remaining, the difference still remains, or which Aristotle is unable to write down the simple phrase, nightingales don't whine. In my knowledge, it was only William S. Burroughs in the Electronic Revolution who stated that a very brilliant, smart old rat nevertheless can't publish an article in the Reader's Digest how young, unexperienced rats avoid human traps. The old rat is wonderfully brilliant, but writing isn't his best. And this implicit graphematic distinction between nightingales, dialectus, and logos, speech, on the other hand, coincides with Aristotle's differentiation between vocal or oral symbols of experiences, patimata, and written ones. Every people and every humans and every people make the same experiences, patimata, but all of them turn these experiences into different sounds, Persian sounds, Greek sounds, Latin sounds, and so on. And these sounds are symbolized for a second time by different writing systems as Greek or Latin, and so on. And so only the experiences are interculturally constant. There is no feedback between thought and script. There's no explanation of Hellenistic polyglottism, which nevertheless exploded at Aristotle's time, when every Alexandrian Jew learned the Greek as a second language, and every cultivated Roman had to learn Greek. And in order to last fatal sentence on Aristotle and his hateful or baleful influence on the cultural tradition of our culture. Sorry for the pleonasm. Aristotle and his many specialized students during his lifetime and after his lifetime had the prominent job of selecting the manuscripts going by ship to the two big Hellenistic libraries of Alexandria in Egypt and Pergamon in Asia Minor. And some devilish imp in Aristoteles or his followers has arranged things so that in no one of all these thousands of manuscripts and papyrus rolls, there's one musical song anymore. We have the texts of Sophocles and much more text from Euripides and text and the whole and they have no the whole musical notation system would have been lost if not in the course of the 19th century some marble inscriptions did show up, which have been transcribed and deciphered. So the end of Greece is the beginning of both. Greek has sunken into prosaic, music-less Simon, and Rome will rise out of these ruins, and in opposition to my long talk about the Greek innovations, I just concentrate myself on the most striking traits of the Roman scriptural system. As you learned already by hearing that the Greeks had landed on the small island of Ischia Pelikusa about 760 or 70, the Greek arrived on their black ships in ancient times as heroes and warriors, just like Ulysses, on the southern strands and islands of Italy. And Italy as a word just meant this southern part of it. Italy as a word is a classical case of the disappeared digamma. You have to supply the W and saying Vitaly for Italy. And then this etymological sense lies open. Every time you order an Italian tonato in an Italian restaurant, you know what you do. You want to eat a young calf, a real, not an old ox, but a young real, which is quite difficult to get on the island of Ithaka or the island of Euboea or the peninsula of Attica, but which is very easy to get in the fertile regions of Taranto or Campania. So, the Greeks had good reasons good gastronomic reasons to look out for Naples and Taranto and all these beautiful bays and newfound towns. They brought with them their letter system, and they came into close contact with the Etruscans from Middle Italy. The Etruscans as the masters of islands like Elba, were powers of iron technology, and iron wasn't so. Iron was seldom on the Greek mainland. So Greek colonists and Etruscan aristocrats came into close contact, and the Etruscans took over the Greek alphabet, which they later on changed in some not important aspects. And now we stay before almost perfect paradox, giving the Greek letter forms. The Etruscan inscriptions are all perfectly readable nowadays, but barely understood at all. Our longest text in Croatia has about more than 1,500 words, which would be massively enough to decipher it, but the Etruscan language shows no familiarity at all with other languages which we know, or which we half know. And so it's still a bleeding wound or riddle in the heart of classical scholarship, that Etruscan texts and therefore rituals and cults can't be deciphered, although they are obviously the most important precursors of the Roman religion. It is my short, to put a long story short, I'd say that the Romans as influenced and formed by the Etruscan aristocracy, have invented religion as such. There is no Greek religion, there has not been a Greek religion. The Greeks didn't believe in their gods. You are not obliged to believe in Aphrodite. She exists, whether you honor her or not. She is much too powerful to ask for our consensus of faith. But Roman religion is more risky. I'll come back to this. Try to order my argument. The second Etruscan influence, very fateful in my eyes, is the Roman numeral system. The Etruscan numbers remained primitive notches for 1, 2, 3, or 4 sheep, and then came hands for 5 sheep, and then came double hands for 10 sheep, misunderstood as an X. And as the Romans and Etruscans sometimes were too lazy to make 9 notches next to another, they invented abbreviations, not in the sense of Greek addition of numbers, but in a way of subtracting of numbers. When you came to 4 notches, you erased the 4 notches and wrote.
Yeah.
You all know this, but we want to write 4, and we can surely make 4 notches or lines, but we can see that 4 is 5 minus 1, and so we can symbolize 4 as this way. And the same holds true for 9, and 9 is 10 minus 1, and this is no joke. For the first thing, it makes elementary arithmetic much more complicated and ineffective than in the Greek case. You should try it out on your block paper. And everybody who pretends, as Sibylle Grammar in Berlin, that all antique number notations are clumsy and heavy, overlook this difference between Greek elegance and Roman clumsiness. So the development of mathematics or of music had nothing to do with Roman development. The only fact is just this breaking of the unity of the number and the letter system. And this breaking is, as I said, not just a joke. The Roman, the legio, how to pronounce legio in Latin?
Legend.
Legend. The legend. What is a legend? A legend is 10 soldiers added by another 9 little parts of 10 legionnaires, and so you come to 10 times 10 to 100, and from 100 you come to 500, and from 500 you come to 1,000, and finally to the legion, which counted usually between 5,000 and 6,000 soldiers. And now, take the not rare case that the legion disappointed his commander. It didn't resist the slave Spartacus, it didn't resist the brilliant strategist Hannibal. What would the commander do with his Roman legion? He would apply this law that 9 is 10 minus 1.
Subtraction.
The little groups of 10 soldiers were built, and then lot was taken, and in every group of 10 soldiers, 1 was selected and decapitated. And
Decimation.
This is decimation. 9 remained, 10 minus 1. So it was, this decimation, this subtraction, is a power play. Now here my notes are rather shaky and inconsistent in a way. This another form of decimation I might see in the invention of abbreviations. Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome, is never written out like this, but SQ2R is the standing formula for this impossible and between the Senate and the plebs. On the one hand, you have the Capitol, this is Senate and the House of Representatives, as in the Washington D.C. And on the other hand, you have the plebs. And their centennial fight is tantamount to the history of Rome, even to the writing history. Abbreviations are, as every American or German Wehrmacht officer knows, an imperial gesture. And the very name of the letter in Latin litera is remarkably obscure, difficult to interpret. We have only one certainty, notwithstanding some other statements. The second, the alternative word for letter, for written letter, is elementum. And if you take your tongue and become again the child learning Roman and learning the Roman alphabet, you can easily play around L, M, N, D. This etymology is so convincing that every protest against it doesn't make sense in my eyes. So you might say that this alphabetic consciousness, which was no Greek acquaintance, is somehow specific for the new Latin sensibility to science systems. LMN would be a nice example. In Cicero, whom I really don't like, philosophers discuss the possibility whether or not some 10,000 apes writing blind letters could produce Shakespeare's complete works. That is Ennius' complete works in the Latin case, but it doesn't make a difference, you see. So this consciousness of the contingency and combinatorial power of the alphabetic system would be proper to the Roman sensibility. So. And one of the Roman poets, probably one of the greatest, has made a systematic case out of this. I speak of Lucretius, of Titus Lucretius Carus, stemming from a noble gens, and opting nevertheless for the plebeian goddess of Venus and no other god or goddess in the whole universe. And Lucretius has put himself the ungrateful job to translate Greek, ancient Greek, pre-Socratic Greek knowledge into modern, let's say modern, Latin concepts, understanding the fact that Latin is poor in regard to the Greek language. But the accuracy of Lucretius' poem, De Rerum Natura, on the essence of being, is monoglot and doesn't understand any Greek. So Lucretius has to translate all Greek thought into Latin simpler thoughts. And so he says to Memmius, this young addressee, look, young Memmius, I teach you these difficult, invisible, all too small Greek elements or atoms. You can't see them, but you can look on the pages of my poem, and then you can see many letters, elementa, jumping around, turning around, always the same, and always making different sounds and different senses. This is book 1, verse about 820, for anybody who would like to look it up. So, Derrida's grammatology would have gained in knowing this first application of grammatology to Latin poetry. But unfortunately it didn't. This profession, I don't like the word job, this profession is this heavy work of translating pre-Socratic Greeks under omission of Hellenistic silly poetry into modern Latin of the time, about Caesar's time, was at the same time, I think, a political act. Starting with the invocation of Venus, of Aphrodite, as the highest and only goddess, which makes us live and desire and breath and growth and grow. The aristocrat, the noble Lucretius, goes on the side of the plebeians and on the side of Gaius Julius Caesar. The first line of the poem, Ene odum genetrix, hominum divom evolutus. Mother of the Eneids, mother of the lust of mortals and immortals. The English translation, from which I defer, translates hedone, voluptas, by pleasure. No comment. And 21 hexameters later, this Venus is addressed by the Latin formula qui omnia gubernas, you who steerest everything. And this is a verbatim quotation from Parmenides' poem addressing Aphrodite as the daimon he panta gubernai, which or who steers, who controls everything. And in this word gubernai or gubernai, you read the words of kybernetics and information systems, and it's a long historical bridge over the centuries. So when Lucretius had, in a sense, nobilitized Venus against the other Capitolinian gods, Jupiter, Minerva, and Juno, the senatorial gods, it was more easy. It was easier for Caesar with his millions and milliards and billions of stolen money from Gallia and Hispania and Egypt to overcome the senatorial power and the aristocratic power system based on these old-fashioned religion, and turning Rome into an aphrodisiac, ongoing festival of pain, of bread and games. And these games prominently included Greek beauty, Greek booty and Greek booty, or Greek beauty as Greek booty. Statues made of bronze or of marble, whole libraries were taken down to Rome and turned into bilingual public libraries, offered, for instance, by Augustus, but the Greek volumes were always on demand, and the Latin volumes still on their shelves or in their Dovis columbaria. So I finish this little excursion into Rome and into Roman power systems and the day by 2 or 3 remarks on the switch from the republican to the imperial power system. Caesar, after having conquered Egypt, became aware that the old-fashioned Roman lunar calendar was unable to rule the world in the sense of these years and centuries, and he took the model of the Egyptian calendar based on 365 days and introduced it into Rome. From this moment on, Julianic calendar, the imperial power system could be synchronized from Spain to Arabia Felix. It was the same universal imperial time measured on the stand of the sun, and whereas the lunar calendars are heavily dependent on their geographic local coordinates. Second inspiration, Caesar and his successor Augustus thought about imperial secrecy and devised the first cryptographic systematic devices we hear of or from. When Caesar wanted to write A, he put a B. When he wanted to write B, he put a C, and so on and so on. And when he wanted to write a Z, he put A again. And so it was the modular algebra of the Roman alphabet. Caesar and his successor, being both in Egypt, discovered the lightness not of being, but of papyrus as a writing material for swift and economic transmission of all these cryptographic imperial commands. An imperium, in the verbal sense, means nothing than power, nothing than command, order. Imperium is imperium, is imperium, is imperium. And it's no reign, no system, no political organization. It's just the command flow inside the Roman Empire. And in order to implement this geographic command flow, Augustus took over from the Persian relay. Augustus organized the so-called cursus publicus. The public, or more precisely, secret writing system, exclusively open to officers and legates, and connecting Rome to every region on every limes, every limit of the empire, from Edinburgh to Tamanrasset. So this empire, like the classical one of China, was a polyglot language with many people, many languages, many beliefs, but the functionment of the year and the functionment of the army. Two monopolies had to be introduced. The solar calendar for every province and the Latin command language throughout the empire from east to west. That is why, even in Jerusalem, where it looks like rather silly, there's a little inscription on a little cruelful cross, and this inscription says, INRI, and is written in Latin, Jesus Nazarenus Rex Judeorum. This is for the soldiers. The two other inscriptions, the one Hebrew and the other Greek, are for the Aborigines and for the Cadillac people. So, I got my polytheistic day, and I have the unpleasant obligation to switch tomorrow into my monotheism topology. Wish me the power to continue. I thank you for your power to listen and not to despair.
Thank you very much.